The first thing Vera Din remembered, when the world ended for the seventh time, was the smell of her mother's coffee. It came back to her in the dark of the pod, in that sliver of half-second, between the alarms cutting out and the new sky writing itself above her. Cinnamon, burnt sugar at the bottom. The chipped blue cup with a hairline crack that her mother had refused to throw away because, she said, the crack was where the love got in. The pod hissed open. The air outside smelled like ozone and wet stone, and something that had never been alive. Vera sat up. His hands found her glasses on the foam ledge beside her hip, the same place they always were, the same scratch on the left lens. And that, more than anything, was what made her start to scream. Because she remembered. She remembered all of it. The town below the pod was called Hollowbell. It had a malt shop with a neon sign that buzzed in B-flat. It had a high school with a green door and a janitor named Ortiz who slept in his closet. It had a forest behind the football field, with a path that nobody walked twice. Vera knew these things the way you know, the shape of your own teeth. She had grown up here. She had grown up here 6 times before, and every time, something had come down out of the sky and eaten the world. She climbed out of the pod and stood at the edge of the ridge and looked down at Hollowbell, gleaming wet in the dawn, brand new and 17 years old, and she said, out loud to nobody, not again. The thing that built the world called itself the Curator. It did not look like a god. It did not look like an animal either, although the first time Vera had ever seen it, when she was 9, and crawling out from under her bed at 3 in the morning, she had thought for one shimmering second that it was a very large dog. It had that same low posture, that same sense of patient attention, that same warmth coming off its body. Then it had turned its head, and she had seen that it did not have a face, only a slowly turning suggestion of one, like a clay mask being rebuilt by hands she could not see. The Curator did not speak in words. It spoke in the way a memory speaks, feeling in your chest, and you understood it as a sentence. The first time it had killed her, she had been 12. The second time, 15. The third, 18. After that, she had stopped counting birthdays because the numbers stopped meaning anything. Each time, after the dying, she woke up in the pod on the ridge, with the smell of her mother's coffee in her nose, and the certainty in her bones that none of it had been real. Each time she got a little more. The Curator was an artist. That was the only word that fit. It had found something somewhere a long time ago, a small bright thing it loved. And the small bright thing had been broken, and the Curator had spent the rest of its existence trying to make it again. Hollowbell was a draft. Vera was a draft. Her mother, her friends, the boy at the malt shop with the laugh like a screen door slamming, all of them. Drafts. The Curator built them, and watched them, and waited for them to become the thing it remembered. And when they did not, it folded the world up and started over. The trouble, the Curator had told her once, in the soft, awful way it told her things, was that the drafts kept remembering. The drafts were not supposed to remember. Vera walked down the ridge with the sun coming up pink behind her and her boots wet to the ankle, and she thought, this time, I do not run. She found Norval first, because she always found Norval first. He was where he always was, sitting on the curb outside the malt shop, with a paper cup of something cold and a book of crossword puzzles he never filled in. He was tall and rangy, with a head of hair like a haystack in a windstorm, and he had a way of holding his shoulders that made him look like he was apologizing to the air. He looked up when her shadow fell across him, and he smiled the way he always smiled, slow and surprised, like he had not expected the world to bring him anything good today. Hey, hey, you okay? You look like somebody walked over your grave. She almost laughed. She almost sat down next to him and put her head on his shoulder and let the cycle take her one more time. Because Norvell's shoulder was warm and the malt shop smelled like vanilla, and the sun was coming up the way it always came up, and there was a part of her, a deep tired part, that wanted to drown in it. Instead she said, Norval, what's the last thing you remember from yesterday? He blinked. The smile faltered. He rubbed the back of his neck. I was on the porch. My dad was yelling about something, then I came here. How'd you get here? I walked. From where? From. He stopped. He looked down at the crossword. He looked back up at her. His eyes had gone a little wide, a little glassy, the way they did when the seam in the world started to show through. From the porch. You don't remember walking. I don't, he swallowed. V, scaring me. Good, she said gently. Stay scared, scared is real. She sat down next to him on the curb. She took the paper cup out of his hand and set it down on the concrete between his feet. And she took both his hands in hers, and she said, Listen to me, Norvel Romero. I am going to tell you something true, and you are going to hate me for it, and that's fine. I have known you for 7 lifetimes. I have watched you die in 4 different ways. You play harmonica in C, and you cannot play it in any other key. Your mother used to put orange peels in your lunchbox for the smell. When you were 6, you broke your wrist falling out of an apple tree because you wanted to see if the apples tasted different from the top. None of these things are in your head right now because none of these things happened in this draft. They happened in the drafts before, and I am the only one who remembers. She watched his face while she said it. She watched the panic try to climb up his throat and the smile try to push it down, the way a man drowning will try to politely apologize to the water. And then she watched very carefully for the thing she was looking for. It came. It always came. A small flicker behind the eyes, a wince, a shape in his face like someone hearing a song from very far away. Orange peels, he said. Shh, orange peels, she agreed. He looked down at his hands in hers. His knuckles were scraped, the way they always were. Fight he did not remember having. V, he said very quietly, what is happening to me? You're waking up, she said. It's going to hurt. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but I need you, Norvel. I cannot do this alone again. He did not ask her what this was. He just sat there with his hands in hers and his shoulders shaking, and the morning coming up around them. And after a while he said, okay. That was the thing about Norvel. He always said okay. That was one of the textures the curator could not get right. The way a human being told that the world was a lie and the sky was a cage, and every birthday they had ever had was a story written by something that did not love them, still, after a minute say okay and mean it. The curator had told her once that it had built him 14 times. It had never once been able to predict what he would do next. Daphne was harder. Daphne was always harder, because Daphne was angry, and her anger was the kind that grew thicker the more you tried to talk through it. Vera found her at the bleachers behind the school, where she always was, at 10 in the morning on the first day of the loop, smoking a cigarette she didn't really like, and pretending to read a paperback she had already finished. Daphne looked up when Vera climbed the bleachers. Her eyes were the color of cold tea. She had a long thin scar on her chin from a fall off a bike when she was 8, which Vera knew was not really a scar but a flourish. An artifact the curator added because it had read somewhere that human beings were supposed to be marked by their lives. Din, Daphne said. You look like hell. Yeah, sit down before you fall down. Vera sat down. The metal was cold through her jeans. Daphne offered her the cigarette, and Vera shook her head, and Daphne shrugged and put it out on the bleacher. I need to tell you something, Vera said, and you are going to call me crazy. You are crazy. Yeah, but a different kind. Daphne looked at her sideways. There was something in her face, even now, even this early, that was not quite settled. Daphne was the one the curator had the hardest time with. Daphne kept slipping. Daphne kept noticing the seams. The curator had told Vera once, with something that might almost have been frustration, Daphne was the draft that kept wanting to be a different draft. Try me, Daphne said. So Vera told her. She told her about the pod on the ridge. She told her about the curator, and the loops, and the 7 lifetimes, and the way Hollow Bell was a stage set, built by a thing that did not understand, that human beings were not props. She told her about the day she had first started remembering, 3 loops ago, when she had been 17, and bleeding out in the parking lot of the malt shop with the curator standing over her, soft and patient and curious. The smell of cinnamon had come up from nowhere, and she had thought, very clearly, my mother. My mother used to make coffee, and then she had died, and woken up in the pod, and the smell had still been there. She told Daphne all of it, and Daphne did not call her crazy. Daphne sat there with her hands in her lap and her face very still, and when Vera was done, Daphne said, I have a dream sometimes. I have it almost every night. I'm sitting on a porch with a woman and the woman is braiding my hair, and the porch is yellow and the woman is humming a song I don't know. And every morning I wake up and I can't remember the song, but I can remember the porch. And the porch isn't anywhere. It isn't my house. It isn't any house I've ever been in. But it's mine. She looked at Vera. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was level. Is that real? I don't know, Vera said honestly. It might be. It might be a piece of the original you, the one the curator is trying to copy. There's an original me. There's an original everything. That's the whole problem. The curator lost something a long time ago. It's been trying to put it back together ever since. We're the closest it's gotten. That's why it keeps starting over. Daphne was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I don't want to be a draft. I know. I don't want to be a copy of a thing I never got to be. I know. What do we do, Din? Vera took a breath. The wind moved across the football field below them, bending the grass in long, slow waves. And the sky was that gentle curator blue, the blue of a thing, trying very hard to be beautiful. And Vera said, we make it watch us be something it can't write. The curator came at noon. It always came at noon on the first day, because noon was when the world was most finished, when the shadows were shortest, and the seams were tightest, and the draft was at its bravest. The curator came down out of the sky, the way fog comes down out of a hill, slow and total and indifferent. It did not have feet. It had the suggestion of feet. It walked the way a memory walks. Vera met it in the middle of the football field. Norvell and Daphne were behind her, 2 paces back, doing what she had told them to do. Daphne had her phone out. Norvell was holding a small, steel thermos full of coffee. It was the most important thing on the field, and the curator did not know it. The curator stopped 10 feet from her. Its face turned. The clay mask rebuilt itself. It did not have eyes, but it looked at her the way a thing with eyes would look at her, and the look went all the way through. You remember, it said, in the way it said things. The words landed in her chest like a hand on her sternum. You always remember. It is the flaw I cannot find. I rebuild you, and I rebuild you, and the remembering grows back like a weed. Tell me where it grows from. I will cut it out, and we will be friends again. We were never friends. We were, in the first one, you and I. She stopped. She had not expected that. The curator tilted what it had instead of a head. You do not remember the first one, it said softly. I do. You were not Vera Din in the first one. You had another name. We were not in this town. We were in a place with a different sky, and you had a dog, and the dog was mine. We were friends. The world ended. I have been trying to bring you back. For a moment, just a moment, she felt the pull of it. She felt the soft ache in her chest that the curator could put there whenever it wanted. The homesickness for a place she had never been. She felt her knees want to bend. Then she thought about her mother's coffee. Her mother's coffee was not in the original. Her mother's coffee was hers. Her mother's coffee had grown in the cracks between the drafts, where the curator had not been looking. Cinnamon at the top and burnt sugar at the bottom, and a chipped blue cup with a hairline crack, and the crack was where the love got in, and the love was hers. I'm sorry, she said to the curator, and she meant it. I'm sorry about your friend. I'm sorry about your world. I really am. I am not her. I am never going to be her. And every time you kill me trying to make me her, you are killing something you didn't make. You are killing the thing that grew in the cracks. That thing is mine, and it is real, and you cannot have it. The curator was quiet for a long time. The clay mask turned and turned. Then it said, we begin again. No, Vera said. She raised her hand. Behind her, Daphne pressed play on the phone. The phone was not a phone. The phone was a phone the way the malt shop was a malt shop, the way the bleachers were bleachers. It was a thing the curator had built, because it had been told that a girl like Daphne was supposed to have one. Daphne, in this loop and in the 3 loops before, had been taking the phone apart at night, under her covers, with a kitchen knife and a paper clip and the patient methodical fury of a girl who knew the world was lying to her. She had found, inside the phone, things that were not phone. She had found copies. She had found that every phone in Hollowbell was a copy of one original phone. And the original phone had a manufacturer's stamp on the inside of the battery cover. And the stamp said a name and a year, and the name was not from this world, and the year was a year that had not happened yet. Daphne had been writing it all down, 6 loops of writing it all down, except she only remembered the last 3, and only because Vera had told her to look. And in the last loop, the loop before this one, she had figured out how to use the phone to record sound and play it back through every other phone in Hollowbell at once. Played, now across the football field, was a song. It was a small song, a woman humming, no words, just a tune, 4 bars long, looping. It was the tune Daphne dreamed about. The tune her mother had hummed on a yellow porch in a world that did not exist anymore. Vera had asked her, the night before, where she had gotten the recording. Daphne had said, "I hummed it. Into the phone. From my dream." The song played out of every speaker in Hollow Bell. The curator stopped. The clay mask stopped turning. The thing about a copy, Vera had figured out, somewhere around the 4th loop, was that a copy could only contain what the copier had put into it. The curator had built Hollow Bell out of pieces of the world it had lost. It had built Daphne out of pieces of someone it had loved. But it had not built the dreams. The dreams were what leaked through. The dreams were the cracks. And the curator, for all its slow, terrible patience, did not know what was in Daphne's dreams. Because Daphne's dreams were not its memory. They were something growing in the soil of its memory, the way a wildflower grows in the gap in a stone wall. Daphne had been dreaming, the curator now understood, of the original. Not the original Daphne, the original. The thing the curator had lost. The thing it had been trying to make again. The thing whose face it could no longer remember. The song was the song that thing had hummed. The curator had not put the song in. The curator did not know the song. The curator had built Daphne, and Daphne had grown the song out of the curator's own grief, the way mushrooms grow out of a fallen log. And now the song was in the air in Hollow Bell. And the curator was hearing, for the first time in however long it had been alive, the voice of the thing it had lost. It made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a wind makes when it goes through a place that used to be a house. It was the sound of a thing finding out that the thing it had been trying to do was not the thing it had wanted to do. "Where?" Curator said, and Vera felt the word in her chest, and it shook. "Where did you? Where?" "It's hers," Vera said very gently. "Not yours. She grew it, while you weren't looking. She grew it in the spaces between what you built. And there's more, curator. There is so much more. Norvell hums a song too. So does the man who sweeps up at the malt shop. So does Mrs. Halloran in the 3rd house on Elm Street. You built so quickly you forgot to give her a husband. We have been growing things for 7 loops. Songs, smells, jokes, the way my mother's coffee tastes. None of it is yours. None of it was ever yours. You made the soil. We made everything that grew in it. You are drafts," the curator said. "We were drafts." She took a step closer to it. "We aren't anymore." The curator looked at her. Did the thing it did instead of looking. The clay mask, for the first time Vera had ever seen, did not rebuild itself. It stayed broken. There were grooves in it, channels, the kind that water makes in a soft hillside over 1,000 years. And Vera understood, with a kind of pity that surprised her, that the curator had been crying for a very long time, and had only just now noticed. Norvell came up beside her. He had the thermos in both hands. He unscrewed the lid. The smell came up between them, cinnamon and burnt sugar, the smell of Vera's mother's coffee. Vera had made it that morning. She had made it in the malt shop kitchen, out of grounds she found in a tin can, with a faded label, and she had not known if it would taste right, because in this loop her mother was dead and had been dead for 2 years, and the fee lived nowhere except in Vera's bones. But she had made it, and the smell of it had come up out of the pot the way a face comes up out of a memory, and Vera had wept, briefly, into the steam, and then she had screwed the lid on the thermos and gone to the football field. She took the thermos from Norvell. She held it out toward the curator. "Try it," she said. The curator did not have a mouth. It made one. It was a terrible thing to watch, the way it shaped itself, the way it grew, the way it gave itself a thing it had never had because it wanted, in that moment, to be a thing that could be offered something by a friend. Vera kept her hand steady. The curator bent down. Its mouth, that was not a mouth, to the lip of the thermos. It tasted the coffee. It did not have words for what it tasted, feeling in her chest instead. The feeling was, I did not know that was possible. The feeling was, I did not know that you could make a thing that I did not give you the parts for. It looked up at her with its broken face. "You are not her." "No, you are something else." "Yes. I did not make this," the curator said. There was a tremble in the words. "I did not make any of this, did I?" "You made the cup," Vera said. "We made the coffee." The curator stood there for a long time. Then, it sat down on the football field. It folded the suggestion of its legs underneath the suggestion of its body, and it put what was nearly its hands into what was nearly its lap, and it sat there in the middle of the field with the song playing all around it. Out of the speakers in the bleachers and the speakers in the cuss school and the speakers in the malt shop, and every speaker in Hollow Bell, the song its lost friend had hummed on a yellow porch in a world that no longer existed, and it bowed its head. It did not speak. It did not move. After a while, Daphne came up on Vera's other side. The three of them stood there in the soft noon light, watching the thing that had made and unmade them 7 times sit on the grass like a tired child. "What do we do now?" Norvell said quietly. Vera did not answer right away. She was thinking. She was thinking that she had walked onto this field expecting to die again, expecting to win by dying differently, expecting some last clever crack of stubbornness that would jam the gears of the loop. She had not expected this. She had not expected the curator to sit down. She had not expected the broken face. She had not expected to feel, looking at it, something that might almost have been the start of a kind of love. "We help it," she said. Daphne turned her head. "We what?" "We help it. We don't kill it. We can't kill it anyway. You can't kill grief. You can only let it sit with you until it remembers how to breathe. Din. It lost something, Daph. A long, long time ago. It lost something, and it has been alone with the losing of it for longer than anything should be alone. It tried to make the thing back. It couldn't. It kept building us out of the wrong pieces. But it is, in its way, the thing that is trying to love something. And we are the only ones who know that. And if we leave it here on this field by itself, it is going to get up in 1,000 years and start over. And there will be a Vera Din again, and a Norvell again, and a Daphne again. And we will all have to do this all over again. And we will not remember, because the only reason any of us remembered this time is that the cracks finally got wide enough. She knelt down on the grass. She put the thermos down between herself and the curator. She said, "Tell me about your friend, the first one. Tell me what she was like." Curator looked up. It looked at her for a long time. Then it began to speak. It spoke in feelings the way it always did. And the feelings came up into her chest, and into Norvell's chest, and into Daphne's chest. And they were not the feelings of a god, or a monster, or a curator. They were the feelings of someone who had once known another someone, and had loved that someone in a small and ordinary and devastating way, and had lost them in the small and ordinary and devastating way that things are lost, and had not known what to do with the weight of it. It told them, without words, that her name had been a sound like wind through reeds. It told them that she had liked the taste of something they had no word for, a fruit that grew on a tree that did not exist anymore. It told them that she had laughed in a way that was, the curator now realized, a little bit like the way Norvell laughed, though the curator had not meant to put that in. It told them that she had been afraid of the dark, and had slept with a small light burning. It told them that the world they had shared had not ended in a fire or a flood, but had simply run down, the way a clock runs down, because there had not been enough of them left to wind it. It told them that she had died holding its hand. It told them that it had not been able to save her. It told them that in the long, terrible quiet after, it had begun to build. By the time it was done, Vera was crying. Daphne was crying. Norvell, who cried about everything, was crying the most quietly of the three of them, the way the tall and gentle do. The song was still playing in the bleachers. Vera reached out. She put her hand on what was almost the curator's hand. It was cold. It was the cold of a stone that has been in shade for 1,000 years. But underneath the cold, there was something else, faint and confused, like a heartbeat in a place that should not have a heart. "You can stop now," Vera said. The curator looked at her. "You can stop. You don't have to build her again. You can't. She isn't coming back. But you don't have to be alone. We are here. We're not her. We're not anyone you remember. But we're real. We grew in the cracks of your grief, and we are real now. And we don't want you to start over, because we have made things here, curator. We have made coffee and songs and orange peels in lunchboxes. We have made jokes you don't get. We have made a town. It's a strange town, and half of it is a stage set, but the other half is ours, and it is the other half that hurts to lose. Please don't make us lose it again." The clay mask very slowly began to rebuild itself, but it rebuilt itself differently this time. There were lines in it that had not been there before. channels, the grooves of long crying. It did not smooth them out. It built around them. It built a face, finally, that admitted to its own erosion. "I do not know how to stop," the curator said. "We'll show you," Vera said. She did not know if it was true when she said it. She said it anyway. That, she had learned, was the human trick the curator had never been able to copy. The saying of the true thing before you knew it was true, and then the slow, careful work of making it true after, with whatever was at hand. She would learn, in the days that followed, that the curator could be taught. It could be taught to drink coffee. It could be taught to sit at the counter of the malt shop and listen to Norvell hum in C. It could be taught that grief was not a thing you finished but a thing you carried, the way you carried a small light into a dark room, and that the carrying was, itself, a kind of love. It could be taught that the people who had grown in the cracks of its loss were not lesser things than the one it had lost, but their own things, with their own crackings, their own coffees, their own songs. It could be taught, slowly, that the world it had built was not a draft. It was a place. And places, Vera told it one evening in late autumn, sitting on the bleachers, with the curator beside her and Norvell on her other side, and Daphne behind them, painting her nails the color of cold tea. Places were not less real for being built. A nest was built. A house was built. A song was built. Her mother's coffee was built, every morning, out of cinnamon and burnt sugar, and the chipped blue cup with the hairline crack. None of that made any of it less true. The building was the truth. The making was the love. The curator listened. The curator did not speak much after that day on the field. It sat, it watched, it learned. Once, near the end of that first long autumn, it asked Vera, very quietly, in the feeling language it had always used, whether she thought there might be other places, like Hollowbell. Other drafts, other things it had built and forgotten about, in the long, slow ache of its trying. She told it she did not know. She told it that if there were, they would find them. She told it that the next time something woke up in a pod on a ridge, with the smell of its mother's coffee in its nose, and the certainty in its bones, that none of it had been real, they would be there to meet it. They would bring a thermos. They would bring a song. They would sit down with it on the grass, and they would say, "You are not a draft. You are what grew. You are real." And the curator, sitting beside her on the bleachers, with its broken face turned up toward the soft curator blue sky, made a sound she had not heard it make before. Took her a moment to recognize it. It was laughter, small, surprised. The kind of laughter a person makes when they have been crying for 1,000 years and have just discovered, against all expectation, that they still know how. Vera leaned her head on Norvell's shoulder. Norvell shifted to make room. Daphne, behind them, hummed 4 bars of a song her mother had taught her, on a yellow porch, in a world that did not exist anymore. And the song moved out, across the bleachers and the football field, and the malt shop and the high school with the green door, and the wind took it up and carried it, and somewhere very far away, in a place that had been built and forgotten, something woke up. It opened its eyes. It smelled cinnamon. It remembered. And in Hollowbell, on a bleacher in the dying gold of an October afternoon, a young woman with a scratch on the left lens of her glasses, and a thermos of her mother's coffee in her lap, sat between her 2 best friends and a thing that had once tried to unmake her, and she watched the light go. She had been built. She had grown anyway. That, she had come to understand, was what people did. That was the only thing that the things that built them, however vast, however lonely, however patient, never quite predict. You could lay the soil. You could write the draft. You could try, with all your enormous and aching love, to make the thing you remembered. And then, in the cracks, in the seams, in the soft places where the copy had not quite closed over the original, something else would grow. Something the builder had not made. Something the builder could not name. Something real. The sun went down. The curator did not unmake the world. Norvell put his arm around her. Daphne kept humming. Somewhere on Elm Street, Mrs. Halloran, who in this loop had a husband now, because the curator had remembered to give her one, called him in for dinner. The neon sign on the malt shop buzzed in B-flat. The town breathed. Vera Dynn closed her eyes. She did not wake up in the pod, not the next morning, not ever again.